Hello and welcome to the Game Day podcast from talkSPORT with me, Sam Matterface, the talkSPORT football correspondent Alex Crook and the assistant editor of The Mirror and all-round Liverpool fan Darren Lewis, who is here. United's resurgence continues. Rashy ain't flashy, but his goals are coming in a dashy. Chelsea suffer a horror show at Brighton. Manchester City wins snooze press. Liverpool shocked at home by Leeds United. And Arsenal are top of the league. It's all on the Game Day podcast from talkSPORT.
Beautiful goal from Marcus Rashford, who has powered in a header. It's finished. Manchester United 1, West Ham 0.
And I think he can develop his game even more. When you see now he makes 2 headers, for instance, and we worked a lot of that.
I thought the players put in a really good performance, but we're lacking the final ingredient which could maybe make the difference at the moment.
No other place to start than at Old Trafford. We must pay tribute to Marcus Rashford, his 100th Manchester United goal. Man of the match performance, although I'm not necessarily sure about that. I don't know where the man of the match performance came from, because Lisandro Martinez and Diego Dallo were, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely vital to that performance. But a win is a win, Crook.
A win is a win, and they're coming in fairly ready supply at the moment. As you say, it wasn't a vintage performance. United didn't blow West Ham away. I thought they were in complete control in the first half. West Ham took a long time to warm up. When they did, it was a bombardment those final 15 minutes. David De Gea, exceptional. I think special mention for Harry Maguire as well. A lot of pressure on his shoulders, but I think he stood up to the test. Brilliant block late on to deny Jarrod Bowen what looked a certain goal. What I'm most pleased about with Marcus Rashford, I tweeted about this on Sunday night, and they actually picked up on it on the Match of the Day analysis, so we think on the same wavelength, myself and Jermaine Genius, is that Marcus Rashford is now playing like he believes he's a centre-forward. He's spending more time in the penalty area. He's getting himself in positions to score goals rather than hanging out wide and waiting for the ball to come to him. And it reminds me a little bit, there was a season when Wayne Rooney started to score headed goals all of a sudden. It was 2009, 2010, when Sir Alex Ferguson basically told him to spend more time in and around the 6-yard box. Looks like someone's told Rashford to do that as well, and it's paying off.
There's a bit of a relationship developing between Ten Hag and Rashford. When I spoke to Eric Ten Hag last week, he said, Rashy's fun to be around. He's great. He's great at taking on information. He's enthusiastic. He's playing well. The goals will come. Don't panic, blah, 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 blah. And I just thought it was just a bit of personal sort of relationship developing between the two. One of the things also was a bit of a problem in the first half was, Darren, is that he and Ronaldo were almost occupying the same space. There was the famous incident on the edge of the penalty area where they went for the same ball and then they both befuddled it and it ended up coming to nothing. But it's great for England, isn't it, that he started to score goals, because my criticism of him early in the season is that he was getting into great positions. He was having a lot of shots. We were at the game the other week when he was having a lot of shots, but not scoring goals. Now, all of a sudden, those goals are starting to come. It couldn't come at a better time.
You know, the interesting thing about Rashford is that I'm hearing a lot of this. He rediscovered his belief. Actually, it's the fans who have started to believe in him again as well. And what he needed was support to get back to where he could be. And Ten Hag has provided him with that. Your point about Ronaldo, in a way, to me, kind of symbolises what Ronaldo's almost become, in so much as it was a very fast-flowing game. It's a side that plays with so much verb and whatever else. And I just don't see Ronaldo as being a part of it. Rashford is the future. And one last point on that, it was interesting that Galtier at PSG wanted to sign him and wanted to play him in the centre-forward position that Mbappe at times has had to fill in and not been happy about filling in. Hugo Ekitike isn't ready to fill that role. That role had been earmarked for Rashford. Now Manchester United are playing him in that role and giving him the confidence to express himself, and he's doing that now.
Yeah, and what do you make of Crook's overconfidence, Darren? Are you pleased with the fact that he's so happy with life, and he said to me, "I'm in a great headspace. United are going to finish second." His whole life has come together, culminated in this joy that Manchester United have put this brilliant run together at just the right time before the World Cup. Is that overconfidence on his part? Is he getting a little ahead of himself here, do you think? I mean, he would never usually do that, as we know. He's quite an understated character.
Well, he's made a few bold claims on this podcast, but actually, this is one of those ones that I don't think is necessarily that bold, because Now United have moved away from investing in Galacticos and players they're bringing in for commercial value, and they've they are now bringing in players that want to work for the shirt, that want to give the shirt the respect it deserves, that players that don't feel they're doing United a favour, but they're doing themselves and the club and the manager a favour. And yeah, I mean, what is it? 8 wins, 6 wins from their last 8 games, the other 2 drawn, 11 wins from 15 in all competitions as well. I think they're on a tremendous run, and I can't see it stopping anytime soon.
Crook, you think they'll finish second? I mean, it is a bold claim. I mean, it is a huge, bold claim.
Listen, I won't go as far as to say they will finish second, although
you did say that earlier.
Bayo Akinfenwa did their best to get me to say that on Sunday evening on the boot room. But I think they've got a chance of finishing second. I think when everybody's fit, their squad is deeper than Arsenal's. Obviously, it will depend what happens in January. But you look at the teams they've already played. They've played basically everybody in that top half of the table. Obviously been beaten by Manchester City. They've picked up notable wins against some of the other so-called Big Six teams. I think if they can keep people fit and if they can get the likes of Martial back and firing as well, and Varane, then I think the future looks bright. They've got 2 games before the World Cup in the league. They've got Aston Villa and Fulham. If they can win both of those matches, then I think the second half of the season is looking really rosy.
Crook, there's about 10 teams that have a chance to finish in second. I mean, the question was, are they going to finish in second? I mean, Darren, that's just he's now gone from bold claim to skirting around the edge.
He has. And here's my concern for you, Crook, just before you do step over onto the ledge. At the moment, Arsenal have 31 points, right? No team in Premier League history with that number of points at this stage has ever finished outside the top 2. The only team not to win it with those points is Newcastle in the 95-96 season. So if you're saying right now that United are going to defy history, that is quite some bold claim. You still want to do it?
I think they'll finish top 3.
Love it. He would love it. He would love it if Manchester United overhauled Arsenal. Right, let's talk about West Ham very quickly, right? Because let's be honest about it. It's pretty embarrassing for David Moyes that it's 70 attempts now that he's never won a league away game as a manager to Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool or Manchester United. And I've got to admit, the first half, they looked really limp up front. I didn't think that they tested David De Gea at all. Yes, they did towards the end of the game. And certainly towards the end of the match, they were unlucky not to escape Old Trafford with a point. I don't think they would have deserved the point over the course of the 90 minutes. Their approach was pretty pedestrian. Maybe it's the tiredness from the travelling in the Europa League that's starting to catch up with them. But I thought they looked uninspired in attack, Crook.
Yeah, I think that natural cautiousness that has always been attached to David Moyes costs him in the big games. I mean, that is a staggering statistic, arguably more staggering than the one about no team missing out on the top 2 that Darren's just given us. And I think what would annoy me as a West Ham fan is they only really took the shackles off in those final 15 minutes. And when they did that, Manchester United were under big pressure. David De Gea has made a number of excellent saves. But why weren't West Ham more positive from the outset? Why didn't they try and take advantage of what was a patched up Manchester United defence from the get-go? And I think there's still a frustration at Moyes' reluctance to partner Scamacca with Mikel Antonio. And unless that changes, it's difficult really to see West Ham hitting the heights they have in the last couple of seasons and mounting a European challenge.
Well, it was interesting that not only was there frustration amongst the fans about the fact that Antonio and Scamacca aren't playing together, but even Antonio seems to suggest in his interviews this weekend that he was frustrated with it because he said he believed that Scamacca and he could play together. But actually, when they do their training on a day-to-day basis, they always train on opposite sides and are not given the opportunity to form that relationship. They really struggle to get going, to me, West Ham United, and I think they're going to run into a few bits of trouble over the next few months and weeks because you've got the World Cup interruption. Declan Rice is their sort of linchpin, their keystone in the middle of the park. If anything happens to him during the World Cup, they're in massive, massive trouble. I just think they look a little bit off it, to be honest with you, West Ham. And they've been on an impressive run. They've been grinding out results. But the next few weeks are going to be really important for David Moyes.
It's finished. Arsenal 5, Nottingham Forest 0 here, Sam. Arsenal with a 5-star performance to move back to the top of the Premier League.
We showed a lot of personality right from the beginning. We were really determined. We went for it. We didn't hesitate at all.
We were just second best in looking at your opponent and getting beat too easily, and that's the black and white of it, really.
Right, let's move on to Forest and Arsenal. Arsenal 5, Forest 0, and Nottingham Forest were dreadful defensively. Arsenal ruthless in attack, and they ended their little funk by making light work of Steve Cooper's team. Thomas Partey's screamer was almost a carbon copy of the goal he scored in the North London derby. Martinelli's header was absolutely sublime. Saka played well, but the big concern, Darren, it all had us quaking in our boots, was when Saka was taken off. What's happening? Please just wrap him up in cotton wool, stick him in a cryo chamber, do whatever it takes, look after him, mummify him for 3 weeks, whatever you do.
I'm not that concerned as you are, Sam, because we've got so many good players in our attacking framework that I think he should be given the time to rest and recover as long as it takes, because he's going to be a fantastic player for a long time to come, and I don't feel that he should be rushed back. The feeling seems to be fairly relaxed at Arsenal in terms of when he will come back. There doesn't seem to be any panic just yet, particularly given that Reece Nelson came off the bench, 2 goals and an assist. And also the fact that Jesus didn't score yesterday, but I would say that's cause for optimism if other players are stepping up to the plate and taking responsibility.
I agree with you, and he came up with a couple of assists. He defaulted to my captain and fantasy team, and he got me 18 points, so I was delighted with his performance yesterday. Nottingham Forest were bad. Defensively, atrocious. Like, there was one particular incident where Nelson scores, I think it's his first goal, where he cuts in on his left foot, and 2 Forest defenders do that comedy slide right past him. It's woeful defending. But to suggest that the manager who took England's under-17s to a World Cup final and won it, that took Swansea to within a hair's breadth of promotion back to the Premier League without spending a single bean, to the guy that brought Nottingham Forest from the bottom of the table into the Premier League for the first time in 23 years, doesn't go into a game with a plan, is nonsense. It may be that plan doesn't work. It may be that the players don't execute it particularly well. It may be they had an off day. But last week, they went into a game with a pretty clearly defined plan against Liverpool and beat them. So the idea that Steve Cooper is some sort of fraud, to me, ridiculous. Don't even utter those words, Crook.
If I was going to criticise Steve Cooper, it wouldn't be for not having a plan. It would be for not having a plan B. Because we know the plan. It was to soak up Arsenal pressure, try and hit them on the counter-attack, stay in the game for as long as possible. When you concede after 5 minutes, that game plan goes out the window. But they didn't change the plan, and they kept inviting Arsenal pressure, and they kept conceding goals. So I do think he's got a little bit to answer for there. I think the big issue here is recruitment. Jesse Lingard, who, as you know, Sam, when that was announced, we were on air covering for White and Jordan, and I said, this is a disaster for Forest. Someone clearly only going there for the money. 1-year contract, set alarm bells ringing straight away. It's now 24 games since Jesse Lingard scored or assisted. He doesn't look like he wants to be there. He made the wrong career move. He should be at West Ham right now, and I'm sure will be playing a lot better. But the most baffling aspect to this, for me, is that Forest spent £161 million on new players in the summer, and their first-choice centre-backs in the Premier League are still Cook and McKenna. With the greatest will in the world, that centre-back pairing is not going to keep you in the Premier League. And I know you think Forest will stay up. I can't see it. Going into this weekend, they had an identical record after 12 games. Same number of points, same number of goals scored, but they conceded 5 more than when they were last in the Premier League back in 98-99. That ended in relegation. I can't make a case for Forest staying up. The only reason they're in touching distance is because there's not much to separate the bottom 10 teams in the league. They will go down. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
They're going to stay up. Trust me. There's a plan. It's all orchestrated, and they're going to spend loads of money again in January and integrate another 25 players and change the narrative. Don't worry about that. They're staying up. Trust me. Just trust in the process. It's going to be fine. I do think that Lingard has had a bit of a tough time at Nottingham Forest, and he hasn't answered his critics, of which you were one of many. But I want him to succeed. I want them to succeed, because I do feel a little bit like that Steve Cooper is working in a situation where he's trying to manage two things: an incredibly tough situation, a club that hasn't been in the league for a very long time, that have just been promoted to the Premier League. But he's also trying to manage an incredible ego in an owner who's decided that he wants to shower him with gifts that necessarily he wants. I mean, you can only play with so many toys, right? You can only play with so many toys. Let's get to Super Saturday, because I tell you what, Jesse Marsh is pretty happy with the toys that he had at his disposal at Anfield.
Somerville has surely won it for Leeds United.
The result is everything overshadowing, to be honest, because who cares? We could have played our best game and lose 2-1. It would have feel the same like it feels now.
Liverpool 1, Leeds 2. What a game. A Halloween howler for Liverpool on a thrilling night at Anfield, a night where defending was scary and scarce. Crescencio Summerfield became the youngest visiting player to score a winning goal at Anfield in the Premier League since Wayne Rooney in 2005. And what a good finish it was as well. Who wants to go first here? Darren?
I tell you what, I'll go first, and I'll give absolute credit to
Leeds.
They were terrific, and they were enterprising. They were fearless. They showed no respect to Liverpool, and that finish from Somerville was terrific. Nonto, who came on, the 18-year-old, the work he did to provide that opportunity for him was terrific and hasn't really been made enough of. I think as far as Jesse Marsh is concerned, I'm a bit incredulous that people are still saying there's pressure on him when he's just pulled off such an epic, memorable result. I think he possibly still isn't getting the credit he deserves. And you could see from the celebrations from the players and the way they were embracing after the match, they're committed to him. They want to play for him. They've just been very unlucky indeed. But they were brilliant, and they deserve the credit that I don't think they're getting enough of right now.
Well, listen, they got credit on this podcast last week, and we were saying patience, patience, patience. Me and Crook both saying, look, do not, whatever you do, change it again, because this is a team, and I've said it from the beginning of the season. I did an analysis piece right at the beginning of the campaign when they played Southampton. This is a team that are going to win some games, and they are going to lose some games, because they play in a manner where they are all or nothing. They are absolutely everything. And sometimes when they are giving absolutely everything going forward, they can leave so much room behind that it can be exposed. But they will give people trouble. And they gave Liverpool trouble. They've given Chelsea trouble. They will give other big teams trouble. And I think actually they're probably more likely to give bigger teams trouble than they are smaller teams, because of the way that they approach the match. But it's a lot easier to get opportunities when your defenders are incredibly off the pace. I watched the first goal over and over and over and over again. This is the 8th time in 12 Premier League games this season that Liverpool conceded the opening goal. It's the 12th time in 16 Premier League matches stretching back to last season that has happened. And the winning goal, it looked to me like the Liverpool defence was playing at half speed. What on earth has happened?
Well, I like the fact that Darren spent 45 seconds to a minute there talking about this game and didn't address Liverpool's problems once. That's a tremendous effort at deflecting focus from his own team. I just don't think they're very good, Liverpool. If you look at the 11 that they're putting out there man for man, it can't compete with the top teams. I think Sadio Mane, I've mentioned it, Darren disagrees, but that's been a massive problem because Nunez, I don't think Nunez has ever recovered from that red card. You know, he looks like a totally different player to the one that started the season. Defensively, obviously there's talk that Joe Gomez could force his way into the England squad. I think he's probably a long way from that based on what we saw against Leeds at the weekend. Van Dijk is struggling. Salah doesn't look the same player either. Fabinho looks short of confidence in midfield. There are so many problems all over the pitch, and I don't see a way out of this for Liverpool at the moment.
So, Darren, what do you think the reason is? Because I disagree with Crook, right, by the way. I actually don't think that the personnel is that bad. He's sort of painted a picture of this sort of like mid-table level of player. I disagree with that. I think you've got one of the best central defenders in the world, one of the best right-backs, one of the best forwards, and at least one of the best midfielders. So I think they're great, but I don't understand why they're not performing. Can you tell me?
I just think I'm incredulous as to what Crook just said in terms of I don't think they're very good. Replace Diaz for Mane, and it's pretty much the same team as last season that took Man City to within a point and came within a couple of games of winning all of the competitions that they were in. Where Crook is right is in the fact that there are issues with the individual players all over the team. I think the midfield is aging. There is no player in between. That you've got early 20s players and late 20s, early 30s players, but nobody in between. That midfield needs a huge overhaul. In the transfer window in January or next summer, they have to bring in 3 quality players. And those players have to not have the kind of injury records that Thiago, that Keita, and others have had. Matip, I've said before on the show, the players who are injured at Liverpool are mostly always been injured. And so they've got to look at that as far as I'm concerned. But you know me, I didn't write Liverpool off when they were missing Van Dijk. I knew the reasons why they were doing so badly defensively then. None of us can actually put our finger on one specific reason to why they're doing so bad. But as we all agree, all the joking aside, there are a litany of reasons why they're doing so badly. But Liverpool as a club are not stupid enough to get rid of Jurgen Klopp on the back of this. They'll stick by him and they'll come through this.
We all believe Jurgen Klopp is a brilliant football manager. I don't think there's any of us that don't believe that. He is quite difficult to deal with sometimes, but largely he's okay. And most of the time, he's done a very good job at Liverpool since being there. So they're not going to get rid of him, nor should they. They should trust in him and help him and get him through. The change behind the scenes, maybe with the recruitment department, might have affected them. That might also be true. But it doesn't mean, because of what he has achieved, that he is beyond question. Let's go back to Leeds. As we've all said, we think that Jesse Marsch deserves a little bit more respect and should have a little bit more patience.
I was pleased with Jesse Marsch because, as we've said, and I'm not normally one to sympathise with managers, quite the opposite. I think he's got unfair stick. I don't think Leeds have been that bad in too many games this season. And I thought they were excellent throughout the 90 minutes. He made the right subs at the right time. Really excited by Gnonto. I know that Bournemouth were very keen to sign him, so I've heard quite a lot about him and his abilities. And I think Leeds will be fine. They're going to be looking over their shoulder because I don't think they're a team who will necessarily go on a consistent run of victories, but I don't think they'll go down.
Okay, talking of managers that get unfair stick, Brighton 4, Chelsea 1. Graham Potter booed on his return to the Amex Stadium.
It finished Brighton 4, Chelsea 1, so Roberto De Zerbi gets one over on Graham Potter.
I'm happy, I'm very happy, I'm really happy because the win can change something in the head of the people, of the fans, of some player maybe.
We have to congratulate Brighton as well. We had some opportunities ourselves. The scoreline makes it feel a little bit probably worse than it is.
But how can someone who did very well for a club over a 3-year period be booed on his return to the Amex when all he did was take a job at a bigger club? I mean, did Brighton not realise their place in the food chain? I'm not saying that Brighton will always be a mid-table or lower half club, but let's be true, they are right now. Is he not allowed to do a good job somewhere and have ambition to go elsewhere?
Yeah, he is. But I think as far as Brighton fans are concerned, and I've spoken to one or two over the weekend, their view is that they've been plundered. Every time they produce and do the hard work of finding and giving a Premier League platform to quality players, bigger clubs come and plunder them. And Chelsea,
that's their model. That's their model. That's what Tony Bloom has orchestrated because he wants to make money out of it. Surely,
it might well be. But do we have to say? Are we saying that Brighton fans have to be happy about it? Do they have to accept it? I think from their point of view, they don't want to accept it. There was the interest in Paul Winstanley last week, at the start of last week, from Chelsea as well, one of their heads of recruitment. Obviously, the manager's been taken, Bissouma's been taken, Cucurella's been taken, and Brighton fans are fed up. And I think the booing was kind of towards Potter, but also towards the bigger clubs who literally just walk through the front door, take what they want, sit in their armchair, kick their feet up and walk out with the family silver. And Brighton fans have had enough. So it's not necessarily Potter himself, but it's what Potter represents. Because I agree with you, he did a magnificent job at the football club.
4-1 to Brighton. Chelsea were atrocious, absolutely awful. It was embarrassing. Does Graham Potter spend too much time with his algorithms and his mathematical conundrums trying to work out what goes where on a piece of paper, and then not realizing that actually football was also sometimes about a bit of passion, energy, emotion, and cohesiveness? I mean, there's a human aspect to it as well. It's not just dots on a bit of paper and figures on a computer database, Crook.
Yeah, I think you're right. And actually, what did happen with the booing of the likes of Potter and Cucurella as well is that it really fired up the Brighton players. It reminded me of a game that we were at a few years ago in the Premier League when Harry Redknapp brought Southampton back to Portsmouth. It was 4-1 that day as well. I seem to recall.
The same.
Pompey was so fired up for that first half an hour because of the fan reaction to Redknapp that it did spill out onto the pitch, and the players really bought into it. So actually, I think in some ways, by nicking all the staff, Graham Potter did Brighton a favour. And they just seemed to catch Chelsea by surprise with the ferocity of the way that they started the game. Shouldn't really have been a surprise because Graham Potter knows those players so well. But if there is a criticism of Potter, and I think he's a great coach, he overcomplicates it at times. He tries to be too clever. But I do think there are problems for Chelsea. Their best defender is Thiago Silva. He isn't getting any younger. Aubameyang, for me, looks like a player, I mentioned it before, in the veteran stage of his career, looks like a player that struggled at Arsenal when he was last in the Premier League towards the end. So I think, again, they spent a lot of money in the summer. I think if Todd Bowley really wants to get them challenging, they need to spend a whole lot more either in January or go again in the next summer window.
Thiago Silva at times brilliant, but at times, again, got himself caught into a load of different knots. Trossard, fantastic, once again, playing brilliantly, scoring goals, causing issues. I mean, there was a lot of talk about on talkSPORT who is the best player outside the top six. He has to come into contention, doesn't he? Because he has done absolute wonders down at Brighton.
Bournemouth 2, Tottenham 3. I said don't rule out a Spurs winner, and that Spurs winner surely has come.
Yeah, disappointed, but very obviously just gutted for the lads, really, because they didn't deserve to lose that football match.
Bournemouth 2, Spurs 3. How do you analyse this current Spurs team, Darren? They are awful to watch, but they seem to find a way every now and again to win. I mean, they got a little bit of a helping hand from Mark Travers on this occasion, but they went 2-0 down to Bournemouth, and it was awful.
It was awful to watch, but points-wise, they've had their best start ever to a Premier League season, and they've had actually their best start to a top-flight season for 60 years. I think the people in charge of Spurs would rather that than them play particularly well at a point of the season that nobody will remember come next May. And I think that's quite key. Spurs have played good football over the years and won nothing. And you've got to go back, to 2008 League Cup for the last time they did win something. They've been through a lot of managers since then who have played some sexy stuff and ultimately been fruitless. I don't see that anybody can question a guy who knows how to win and has done with his last 3 clubs. I also think as far as Conte's concerned, he said that it won't take just one window to solve the problems at Spurs. It will take several windows. And honestly, any Tottenham fan who believes that Conte should be binned off because they're not happy with the style of play at the moment, honestly, they just don't know that much about football, honestly.
Travers did make a mistake for the goal for Ben Davies. The next goal was poor marking from a corner by Bournemouth. But overall, the XG suggested that Spurs were the better team in the game, created more of the chances in the game. Most of that came in the second half. They were much better in the second half than they were in the first half. XG 2.14 for Spurs, Bournemouth 0.54. 2 goals for Kiefer Moore, which is good news for Wales. 2 brilliantly well taken goals as well. The diving header was particularly impressive. But for the winning goal, Antonio Conte didn't stay and watch the celebrations. He went down the tunnel because he thought there was a possibility that VAR would rule out the goal. And in his words, he said, "Give me a heart attack." So he just went off into the dressing room, which is a little bit of a worry about the faith that he has in VAR. Crook, what happened with the ball boy?
Yeah, that was an incident that actually got overlooked just because of the dramatic nature of Spurs' win. Basically, young lad, around about 14 years of age, probably held on to the ball a bit longer than he should have done as Tottenham had a throw on the edge of the Bournemouth penalty area. I'm sure he was instructed to do that. Lucas Moura got a bit hands-on, and the ball boy ended up being taken away by security. It wasn't Eden Hazard like with that Swansea ball boy. It wasn't quite as physical as that, but it wasn't a great look for Spurs. And I wonder if the FA may be looking into it. But just on the game itself, Bournemouth, as you say, scored 2 excellently worked goals. Header from Kiefer Moore was absolutely superb for the second. I think what will frustrate Gary O'Neill is the nature of all 3 Spurs goals. Actually, the first comes from a throw-in. Marcus Tavernier switches off and allows Sessegnon to get in behind. There's a deflection as Chris Mepham is throwing his body in the way. Maybe Trevor's starting position wasn't great either. Second goal, definitely a mistake from the goalkeeper. The third one, the corner actually comes from a miscued header, a 50p header, as we used to call them back on a Sunday morning from Senesi. Corner not cleared. So I think Tottenham didn't have to work particularly hard for their goals, whereas Bournemouth did, and that will be a frustration. Yes, Spurs dominated the second half. They pinned Bournemouth back, but I think also this game emphasises the gap in class and the fact that the 5 subs rule favours the big teams. You look at the players that Tottenham could call upon when they were making their 5 subs compared to what Bournemouth had on their bench. It was a marked difference.
Darren?
No, I was just asking about the 14-year-old. Do you not think, Crook, that the instruction to him to hold on to the ball a little bit too long reflects badly on the club rather than him? Because in the heat of battle of the game, Lucas Moore's probably not even thinking about who's got the ball. He just wants to get the ball. And why is the ball? I'm not condoning, obviously, the manhandling of anybody, and I don't think he manhandled the kid. He just tried to wrestle the ball itself away. But why are clubs instructing children to get involved in that way at a very fractious point of the match? Surely that's on the respective clubs, because I've seen it before.
Well, I don't know that they've instructed him. That's a guess, unless he's taken the matters into his own hand. But listen, game management is very much a part of modern Premier League football. You look at the amount of time that the ball actually spends in play now. Was it a Newcastle game the other week when there was only 53 minutes where the ball was actually on the pitch? Clubs take every little bit of advantage that they can. I don't know if the FA will clamp down on Lucas Moura. There probably wasn't enough, aggression for that to happen, but it wasn't a great look, particularly at a ground like Bournemouth, where obviously it's very intimate, so everybody, no matter where they were sat, saw exactly what happened.
And the full-time whistle goes at St James's Park, and what a happy, happy place this is to be right now.
Today I thought the individual performances were there and the collective steel was there.
Newcastle 4, Aston Villa 0. Newcastle make a top 4 statement, similar to Arsenal being considered title contenders. When are we going to actually believe that they can make it into the top 4, Darren?
Around about March, April next year, I think, because there's a long way to go. There's also a World Cup in between. And we've seen, all of us and everyone listening and watching has seen enough football to know that as good as any team is right now, we're still in October. This is almost like the 13th fence of 40 in the Grand National. And so Alex Ferguson famously said, didn't he, that I don't really start to think about who's in the title race until around about March, April, till around about Easter. So that's when we can start to look at Newcastle and see whether or not they're going to be in and amongst it.
He's done well, though, Eddie, hasn't he? Go on, say it. He's done well.
He has. And listen, I've mentioned the money before, but I think it's also the management of the players. Almiron, I think only Neymar in the top 5 leagues has scored more goals from South America than Miguel Almiron. That's how well he's done with his 7 so far in the last month or so. And I think as far as Joe Linton is concerned as well, converted from a failing striker into a midfielder, he's done well. The recruitment's been outstanding as well. None of them that expensive, but all of them coming together to form a fantastic platform for the expressive players to go and express themselves. They've done well.
Almiron scored a beauty. Does he score any other type of goals. Not anymore. He's got 6 in the month, the same number as Erling Haaland. We should be bigging him up. He's done very well. Callum Wilson has scored twice in front of Gareth Southgate. Probably could have had a hat-trick during that match as well. Villa were an absolute mess. The idea that their problems were solved by sacking Steven Gerrard came home to roost during this game. They could have conceded 6 or 7 goals. They were defensively awful. But the big talking point for me was why on earth Emi Martinez was not replaced immediately that he had collided with Tyrone Mings' knee. When are we going to start taking concussion protocols seriously in football? He was clearly disorientated. He clearly had a problem. Minutes later, he had to be replaced. There is an extra sub for concussion. Why on earth did they not make it? One look at the replay shows a man being kicked in the head accidentally by a knee from another man who is absolutely huge, running towards his own goal. That impact was obvious straight away. Why did they not react to it?
Well, I still don't think the concussion sub rules go far enough, because obviously had they have made that concussion substitution, I believe, even if he'd been declared medically okay a few minutes later, he wouldn't have been able to come back on. So I think...
So?
Well, no, I think that change needs to be made. I think if that was in the rules... Listen, I'm not condoning Aston Villa. They should have taken him off anyway. But if that was in the rules, I think they would have been more willing to take him off, give him a medical assessment, bring on Robin Olsen, who himself had a bit of a nightmare.
Totally agree.
When he did come on, then I think the decision would have been different. But you're right, he should have been taken off.
I think that while it's in the hands of the clubs will always prioritise the result rather than the well-being of the players. The clubs will deny this up and down the country, and I'm not saying that this was the case in terms of Aston Villa. I'm not actually attributing that to any particular club at all. It's just a general view of mine that it needs to be taken out of the hands of football clubs and needs to be put in the hands of an independent assessor, a medical professional who can basically step in and say, I don't care how important this or that player is to you, he has to be removed right now. Because if you don't do that, you will continue to get things like what we saw with Martinez and other players. As I say, Martinez is only the one we're talking about now because that was the incident. But I think that we've seen lots of examples of football talking, the big talk, the right talk about the concussion. But when it comes to the heat of a match with vital points at stake, clubs don't do what they should. And that's the reason why I think it needs to be taken out of the hands of clubs and given to an independent medical professional to make an assessment and say, no, he must be taken off now.
It's incumbent on FIFA and the IFAB to come up with a plan for this. They've known about the issues for long enough. There's been enough studies. There's been enough campaigning that's been done. There are other sports where there is a ticking time bomb because of the huge contacts that happen in those sports. If you haven't learnt from them, then you're in danger of being seen to be negligent, and you do not want that on your conscience if something terrible happens. Act now. Change the laws, make it applicable straight away, and then everybody has at least the option to be a lot safer and secure when they're playing the game. You've got to make it safe for the participants, and it's absolutely incumbent on FIFA to make that change immediately. Otherwise, one day there's going to be a horrible incident, and we're going to be sitting here asking why nothing was done. Right, let's get to the rest of Saturday.
There is a huge sigh of relief from Manchester City. Leicester City 0, Manchester City 1.
Leicester 0, Manchester City 1. There's 90 minutes we won't get back. City needed a moment of magic from Kevin De Bruyne to see off Leicester. Actually, you criticised Crook, Steve Cooper, earlier in the day for not having a plan B. Well, Brendan Rodgers actually had two plans, and that was the first one was to sit, soak, not let Manchester City score, and then try and stay in the game for as long as possible, change the mode of operating, and then go at them for the last 10-15 minutes. And what he did is basically did keep them at bay for large portions of this game. The only thing that breached them was this world-class free kick, which was totally unreachable by any goalkeeper anywhere ever, because it's gone right in the corner almost at the junction of the crossbar and the post, and there was no chance that the goalkeeper could get there. But apart from that, they've been kept pretty quiet. They brought on Patson Daka and Iheanacho right at the end of the match. And ultimately, there was great chances for Leicester to equalise in this game.
I think you're right. Leicester didn't lose much in defeat. I think they're in a much better place now than they were 6 weeks ago. Kevin De Bruyne, for me, is the best player in the Premier League. I know Haaland is smashing all kinds of goal-scoring records, but De Bruyne is the one who really makes them tick. And that was one of the best free kicks you'll ever see. I mean, literally, it was so precise, so powerful, so clean. It was just a brilliant goal worthy of winning any match. I think they are a different team. When they don't have Haaland as the focal point, I think it's asking a lot at this moment in time for Alvarez to step into those considerable shoes. But as I say, they just keep grinding out wins, Manchester City, and it's hard to see where that will come to an end.
Darren?
I don't have any concerns about City. As I said before, there are lots of concerns about some teams not playing particularly well at this stage of the season. But as we've seen, this stage of the season, nobody will remember it come next April, May, as in relation to City. They are just ticking off another win. They don't have to be spectacular. They don't get extra marks for artistic impression. All they need are the 3 points, and that's what they've managed to do without Haaland.
Crystal Palace 1, Southampton 0. 3 home wins in a row for Crystal Palace now lifted them right up the table after a tough start. Southampton's recent resurgence of 3 games unbeaten coming to an end.
Crystal Palace take all 3 points, but they were holding on at times in the second half. Odsonne Edouard's goal gave them a deserved half-time lead, but the second 45 was very, very different, but Southampton couldn't find an equaliser.
For years we've talked about the grey kit dilemma that Manchester United had down on the south coast. Now, what on earth was that Southampton decked themselves out in during the game against Crystal Palace? Could that have had an effect? I mean, it was awful, wasn't it? I mean, what is it? Is it supposed to be fashion? Is it supposed to blend in with the crowd? Are you distracting your opponents? I mean, come off it. It obviously distracted Shea Adams, who seemed to sort of shoot at the goalkeeper every time he had an opportunity.
There are a few terrible kits this weekend. I thought the number that Forest wore at Arsenal, when I couldn't actually work out what colour it was supposed to be, and the front of it looked like...
I thought it was a training top.
Well, yeah, they looked like the kids had just sort of, thrown some paint over the front of it and saw what stuck. And what about the West Ham orange shorts at Manchester United? They were a bit of a Halloween horror as well. So, yeah, not a great weekend for kit lovers. Listen, Southampton were poor in the first half, and that's been a theme of the season. They start matches badly, they improve after half-time, but inevitably they give themselves an uphill task. And the other problem is they don't have anyone who's going to put the ball in the back of the net on a regular basis. They were very ambitious with some of their targets in the summer. I think had they have signed Cody Gakpo, who was excellent for PSV Eindhoven against Arsenal on Thursday night, we would be looking at Southampton in a different light. But unless they sign a proper forward in January, they are going to be right down there for the rest of the season, and it's not making Ralph Hasenhüttl's job very easy.
Palace think they should have been further ahead before half-time, and probably when you look at the chances that they had, they probably should have been. The first goal from Edouard was really tasty with his combination with Elise before it was chalked off for offside. The Palace goal that they did score was really well crafted, and it felt like a matter of time before they were going to take the lead in that game. Salisu drifting and playing everybody on side for the goal was a real danger for them. But yeah, losing away at Crystal Palace, not great for Ralph Hasenhüttl and not great for Southampton, who are very much well down there this season. Brentford against Wolves finished 1-1.
10-man Wolves holding on for a point. Wolves were reduced to 10 men 7 minutes into stoppage time. A headbutt from Diego Costa on Ben Mee.
Diego, if you look at his career, has always played on the edge, and that's where he's been at his best. I think, so you have to accept that that's what you get.
Let's talk about the sending off of Diego Costa. What is the most startling statistic of the weekend for me is that was Diego Costa's first ever Premier League red card. It's true.
Correct. It's remarkable, isn't it? Given that all the things he did at Chelsea, and all, I wonder when he was a Chelsea player whether referees didn't want to be, they didn't need the aggravation of sending him off and all of the high-profile scrutiny, shall we say, that would have come with it, because he did more than a fair things that basically had us journalists writing a lot about him, shall we say. So yeah, I agree with you. I heard that statistic yesterday and I was really stunned by it. But he absolutely deserved to be sent off at the weekend. He apologised afterwards to his teammates, but for a club that doesn't score goals anyway, he was really needed. And I think that apology, it might be well received, but it doesn't really help Wolves at all.
No, more cards than goals since he left Chelsea, Diego Costa. Brilliant stat, that. Fulham 0, Everton 0. Yep, okay, set your alarm. That was a snooze fest, wasn't it?
All time, Fulham 0, Everton 0. Not the best of games, but Fulham the better side and created the most chances.
They've really been a massive plus for us. You know, Taki comes in on a free, kind of at the minute he's on loan. But the level that they're playing at has really added to the group.
Fulham had 24 shots without scoring, their most in a Premier League game since 2003-04. Mitrovic personally had 10 shots, couldn't get past the stubborn Everton back line. Taki and Cody have done very well back there, and Everton becoming very, very resolute under Frank Lampard. Willian, man of the match for Fulham, more appearances now than any other Brazilian in Premier League history. It wasn't a great spectacle, Brooke.
No, but I think if we're on World Cup watch, yeah, you're right to pick out the two English centre-backs at the heart of the Everton defence. Jordan Pickford was excellent as well. Seems to be building up confidence ahead of Qatar. I think Mitrovic was lucky to stay on the pitch for that challenge. Studs up.
What did you think about that, Darren? Because we had a conversation about it on Sunday Session yesterday, and I was with Mickey Gray and Scott Minto, and they said in slow motion it looks like a sending off, but actually in real life they're both stretching for the ball and it's just a yellow card. VAR looked at it. I got to admit, I watched it. The first time I watched it, I just was like, red card. It's high up above the ankle. He jumps down on top of the, is it Dressagana Gay, I think it is, who he's on top. It's a dangerous challenge, I think.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you. I think you were talking about in slow motion. VARs look at contact in slow motion. They make decisions all the time in slow motion. So why would that not be the case in this situation? I'm very surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised with that. I mean, I think they try to look at it at full speed because they want to see what the velocity and the speed of the impact is. But yeah, I think Crook's right. I think it was not a great challenge, to be honest with you. Darren, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
And Alex, thank you very much to you as well. We'll be back on Thursday afternoon, looking ahead to the Premier League weekend and reflecting on what's happening in the Champions League here on the Game Day podcast from talkSPORT. Remember, you can download us from Spotify, from Apple Podcasts, from anywhere that you get your podcast. See you soon.